relationship structures, and people say, well, the way you're doing it isn't how it works. Well, that's because you're imagining the type of machine you're plugging your batteries into compared to all of the array of machines that exist that operate off batteries around the globe.
Or,
And people
or,
who say, like,
mm,
well, clearly you can't be into power exchange relationships because everybody that's involved is double A's, and all I want is a smoke detector. You're right. That
mm,
might not work for you, right? Because you're looking at a different smoke detector. So,
fair.
yeah, to me, the nerdiness that I go on is these side tangents and these side thoughts around what does it look like or what does it mean to you. And I can picture the ones I've been over the years on all sides of the dynamic. My first two power exchange or authority and authority transfer dynamics were on the S side of master slave relationships. And over the years, I've served in so many different relationship structures or been part of or held space in so many different structures.
Mm.
And the thing I've learned over and over again is I can't make every single one look the same. I just can't.
I don't. I think that's part of the value for me as a person is
Mhm.
the diversity. And I want to step back a second because I think that I miscommunicated a little bit, and I want to acknowledge when I stated the people weren't focusing on winning. I think, well, not I think, I know that I was more thinking of when I heard winning, I took it as a competitive. It's a winning or a losing thing, right? And to me,
Oh, okay.
right? So that's how I perceived it. And I'm with you. Like in my relationships, I'm on this positive growth, winning trajectory. So for me, it was really easy. Like, yep, I'm on a winning relationship. But
Oh, I see. Got it. Well, so you're thinking from the framework of playing, um, Monopoly and who's going to be the one that gets all the points first. And I'm playing collaborative Dungeons and Dragons here.
and that's where I think there was a different or miscommunication or misunderstanding on my part. And after you elaborated more, there was like the aha moment, like how you are using winning and how I perceived winning. There was just a little bit of a gap.
And it's such an important thing to consider, though, because let's say I'm in a two-person relationship and I say, I want both of us to win, or I want you to feel like you're winning out of this. If you're coming from a one of us wins and one of us loses perspective, and you then hear the word feel like you're winning,
Mm-hmm.
then it's, oh, you want me to be gaslit enough that I can pretend that that I'm the one who's actually winning in this situation. Well, to me, I'm like, no, no, no. I want all of us to go home with the gold. All of us, every single one of us. I want all of us on this team to succeed. I think that's one of the things that when we talk about the pains and challenges in relationship is when there's mismatches there, where there's a perception
Absolutely.
that, oh, for my mistress to win at all of this, I have to be suffering. I'm not talking kinky suffering. I'm talking about emotional suffering, right?
Mm.
Like soul and spirit crushing suffering. Um, and I've had people in service to me who felt like they needed to be suffering for me to get my needs met. And I'm like, wow, I actually didn't consent to that.
Yeah.
I wanted relationships where both of us thrive through bringing different things to the table. And and so part of my heartaches have included that mismatch. And I'm just checking. I've lost your video, so I am pausing to see if you come back.
Yeah, I lost it for a second too. It looked, I don't know. I know weather here has
I'm
been
pausing to
funky
see
the
if you
last.
come back. Mine is saying on the air. if folks are live with us, hello, an absolute delight. And I'm just going to babble for a bit
Oh yeah,
until they come back. But if another couple of minutes pass, I will log off and log back in.
I can see you and
So
hear you.
yeah, I'm excited to get
Can
to
you not
be
hear
on
me?
this one. There you are, love.
Okay. I was say no, I could see and hear you. We had a moment where I don't know what happened, but we dropped a lot of frames, like really, really fast. We had ice storms coming in through earlier, and I have
Yes, sir.
satellite internet, so I don't know.
Understood. Look into this direction of what we said we were going to talk about tonight is, or today, depending on when folks are coming in from, is the notion of where some of these miscommunications happen and where some of the pain and whatnot in relationships happens with these basic defaults of understanding of why we're doing this or how we're doing this in the first place.
I agree. And well, look, I don't know about you, but I kind of pride myself on an aficionado of communication.
Well played,
right?
well played.
Yet my own bias, my own perceptions had me perceive someone else that I personally deem as a good communicator. How we had on something so simple as win. Right? And how I loved your analogy because it really put the picture. It went from Monopoly to D&D, and I played D&D more than Monopoly. So you got me thinking back like my olden days, right?
Well, and even within Dungeons and Dragons, right? Are we looking at adventures where we're all going together to fight the dragon together and go dungeon slaying or dungeon crawling, or are we looking at collaborative episodes where our characters are working together to fix an issue or help solve a challenge that's happening in a kingdom or queendom that doesn't involve slaying everything?
Fair.
And one of the things that I think it's interesting about the notion of Monopoly, it was supposed to prove that things don't work right. I guess the history of the game Monopoly, if you haven't looked into it, it's fascinating. But setting
The
us
history
all,
of Monopoly?
the history of Monopoly. Oh, do you not know this?
I actually know a decent amount about it, actually.
Great. Yeah. But these ideas of winning and losing are so ingrained into capitalist culture, into fascist culture, into the idea that we have to have us versus the enemy. And living in the United States right now at this current snapshot of time, these notions of us against the world are in every direction I look. And so if I can have it not be in my dynamics, that lets my shoulders drop a little bit, even if it's for just the times that I'm behind closed doors with the internet off.
Yeah. Wow. We've gone all over. I'm going to try to get us back on topic a little bit. No, I love it.
No,
I love
I'm a troublemaker like that. I acknowledge that I go on routes of adventure.
No, you've given me already, we're only 20 minutes into this conversation. You've already given me some good thoughts to reflect on. And like, even just some of the analogies that you use, I'm going to have to borrow them, and I will with the analogies. But like the collaboration, the looking at it as a Dungeon and Dragon, I actually have a writing that I'm sort of proud on that talks about things being a shared experience, that we come into something as two humans and we need to walk, or dominant does accept a section of responsibility. Maybe that's 51%. The other human that walks into there still has a sense of responsibility and a sense of sharing that experience. And I think it's really important that we think about relationships as collaborations. I did a topic a while back, and And the 100,000-foot view is what spurred the topic. Was I met a gentleman was that he doesn't compromise. I was like, whoa, how have you had a 30-year power dynamic without compromise? He said, because when you compromise, you give something up. He said, when you collaborate, people are working together towards a
Mhm.
common goal. He says, when I think about compromise, I think about a car salesman. And I was like, oh, like, I didn't even realize how much bias or I don't know what the word is to that single word, compromise. I didn't want to compromise. I didn't want to settle. I didn't want to give up what I wanted. But I am willing to collaborate and work really, really hard to get what I want.
Yeah.
I'm not
What
willing
is
to
it like
settle.
if we're on the same team? What would
Yeah.
it be like if we were on the same team? And being on the same team, though, involves having a shared vision. Or else it turns out we're, actually pointing in different directions and trying to pretend like we're going, like, collaborating our effort together when in fact we're pointing in two different directions.
Mhm.
What's the notion? Trying to ride two horses at once?
So I'm going to give you an analogy now.
Bring it on. We're just going to keep throwing them on and see what sticks.
I love it.
Spaghetti.
So this actually comes from my professional world. So I've hired probably north of 1,000 people professionally. And one of my spiels as a leader was, we're going to get on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Our destination is to pay our bills, to feed our family, to buy some Christmas gifts. Every person on this ship has a role. Some of us are going to row, some of us are going to steer, and some of us are going to navigate. But I assure you, if none of us do the job that we agreed to do, none of us are going to get towards our goal.
Right.
And that's the 100,000-foot view of a longer presentation. But that's the thing is, we need to work together and collaborate to build these relationships that we want. We have to be intentional. We have to be mindful. It's not always easy to serve. It's not always easy to be dominant. It's not always easy to be a human.
I think that's the piece, right? It's not always easy to be human. I recently developed a thing that I'm going to just pull up on my computer so I can cite this thing that I'm building right now. The folks who are listening in get to hear a rough draft version of this stuff I'm working on. But I'm looking at this notion of power and like what gets called power exchange. But understanding that when we're using the same words, some of us are having very different conversations. Right? That when somebody says, oh, I'm interested in a power exchange relationship or an authority dynamic relationship, what they actually mean is that they're transferring authority. They're looking to somebody to transfer this piece of authority over their life to. And then sometimes in return, but not always, a different piece of authority comes to them. So an answer might be that, oh, I'm handing control over all of my sex life to you, but you are now handing me the authority to take care of the bills, right? Authority transfer in some way. Next is control and surrender. Some person has the teeth on the back of the other person's neck, and that person, let's go and lets the other person take care of. The next one is service. Do you note how already we're 3 in? And these miscommunications are happening all the time. I've had people say to me, well, you clearly aren't actually in any sort of dynamic because they don't do service for you. And I'm like, that's not what I asked for. That's not what I'm looking for. I've got other service people.
Yeah.
I am confused. And here's this other person who's judging me, looking at me confused, being like, what? Right? For other people, it's about leading and following. You've got a vision, and I want to follow your vision. That's very different than controlling someone.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is inherently better or worse. They just function very differently. And so if somebody's expecting me as a dominant to grab them by the back of their neck and let them wilt when I'm like, no, I got this plan. You got to work with me to make it happen. They were expecting surrender. I'm asking for coworker.
Mm.
right? Or I'm asking for an employee who's going to work their ass off alongside me or just under me, or just behind me. All of these are different than being a possession.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that like you are mine. Possession, huge on my list of things I'm into. Huge. Right? And so there's people who are just like, oh, well, you know, your boy isn't in service. You know, I'm like, no, but they are my boy.
That's it. Yeah.
I peed on it. It's mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I have a couple of other ones on there, but like this notion though, when this idea that when we're saying we're interested in these different dynamics and we're looking to, you know, to be with another person, what are they even thinking they're looking for? Because if they're looking for somebody to surrender to, and I think I am either quote negotiating with or designing with someone, and I think we're designing for a leader follower situation, we might even be using the same words, and we don't find out until 6 months into this thing, or in some people's relationships I've met 7 years into these things, before we realize, oh shit, we've been communicating past each other.
I think,
yeah, go for it.
That's what leads us into the highs and the lows of these relationships, right? Because sometimes we, you know, we're trying to be on the island before we even built the ship, right? Going back to my analogy.
Yes.
And this is where I've been victim. I've done it. Authority is sexy. It's really, really hot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's collars and ownership is hot. But like you said, it takes time to make sure that people are defining what that collar means.
Well, unless you don't want it to take time, right? What you're looking for is
information.
Well, no. That's not where I was going at all, actually. Unless what I'm looking for is to say, you are hot, I shall pee on you. And they go, oh no, please don't. Oh, look, I am yours. The end. One hot night of quick fucking good time. Awesome. Your ship that you might want is just one of those little paddle boats on a like that looks like a swan. That's what you're looking for. There's not everybody who wants to build a 4-mast sailing ship to go across the ocean. Not everybody wants to build a battleship. Maybe what they're looking for is a kayak. Kayaks are awesome. And then even if you have a kayak, are you having that ship? Are you having your kayak go like for a nice little like jaunt for an hour around, you know, the Seattle, you know, in the area around the University of Washington? Or are you taking that same kayak and kitting it out and preparing yourself and the other person in that 2-person kayak with you to go up and down the Puget Sound from Canada all the way down to Olympia, Washington, and back again over the course of multiple weeks? Might even be the same ship, but you're supplying it differently, and you're making sure the two of you know how to paddle in time with each other. All of these are ships. An icebreaker up in the Arctic, very different than a gondola. But all of these are valid for what it is that they do. So I don't think we should vilify certain ships because, oh, we didn't spend the time building it or getting ready. I'm like, seriously, like I can just hop in a dinghy and let somebody paddle me around. We're good to go. It's just a very different experience than a 4-mast sailing ship.
And I cannot say how much I appreciate you elaborating on that, because you are very correct that sometimes I own a couple kayaks and sometimes they're nice. I don't own a big ship. I don't own a battleship. But you know what? If I had the time and the resources, I would build one. I assure you. Right?
Well,
if you give me 3
even if I have
people,
the time and the resources, would never build a battleship. It's in fact against some of my ethics and morals. So, like, Right? Like I
Yeah.
think it's worth considering too that there are just some relationships that are antithetical to how some of us operate. And yet they are the ones that people lift up as being the pinnacle of how a relationship should look in authority dynamics. And I'm like, some of those things, F that noise.
I love how punny that was. Relationships. Oh, yeah, I'm all over it
It's how I
now.
describe them. That's
I
exactly how
mean,
I look at them.
I,
Is
I,
they're all ships.
yeah, yeah. And they all have their place, right? And I guess something I don't want to get too off the topic, but at the same time, it is part of the topic about authority. I've
Yeah.
stepped back in many ways because in my head, I've a lot of it is that four-mast ship.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I've had other ships over the years, and I appreciated those ships, those kayaks, those one-day trips, whatever. And I've pulled back so far from them. I've actually been speaking to my girl a lot about it, how I need some, for lack of better terminology, some fun, some not always worrying about like how are we gonna build the structure of our relationship and this, that, and like the growth and all the business. And sometimes I just need a kayak, right? Sometimes I just
Okay.
need something more simple. Right.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And yet we live in a couple different interesting layers of culture where the story is if we haven't been in the relationship for 7 to 20 years, it's not worth as much as a one night relationship. Right? That the relationships that I've had that have ended were exactly what they were. And instead of
Mm.
bemoaning that ship is gone, what would it be like if I had gratitude for having had it all?
That's a powerful thought. How often, for me, have I associated a good relationship with time?
Yeah.
And this is my perception of other people, to be clear. And then I look at some of my relationships and I value all my relationships, to be clear, for
Mhm.
different reasons.
Yeah.
I've had some amazing experiences in short times, and I've had amazing experiences in long time.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. We are way, way all
But I
over.
also don't think we
This is
are.
really
I mean, we're
fun.
quote off topic,
This
but I think the way that we're not is if we're looking at the heartache of it. I know
mm,
some of the heartache that I've had is because I quote spent 7 years into it, or as I've heard some people say, I can't believe I wasted 7 years with them. And I was like, or I experienced a lot of heartache because of realizing, oh, that relationship of 7 years, it ended with high drama.
mm.
And along the way, when I reflect on it, I can see so many points where here's where a mismatch was, or here's where we thought we were aligned and we actively weren't, or here's where I could have ended it 3 years in and had it have ended excellently, but I gripped on with my teeth for another 4 years with every single therapy session talking about them. That's to me part of when we think about the highs and lows is if what we hold up is time as being the only thing that holds value, it, it doesn't give space for some of the other stuff. And I look back at some of my relationships that I've had over the years, some that have been one night, and some, my former boy who just passed away, we were only in a formal um, daddy boy dynamic for 3 years. At which point I said, "This is the things I need from you." And he said, "Well, that's nice." And I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to give you 3 chances. I need you. This is the thing that I need. Can you deliver it?" And then he didn't deliver it again. And I said, "This is your last chance. This is the thing I need. Can you deliver it?" And he said, "No." And I said, well, he didn't even say no. He just didn't again. And I said, I love you profoundly, and I can't do this unless you will meet this one thing I need. And I know it's not that you don't love me. I know you do. But this thing, this is a quote non-negotiable, right? This is a thing I need that if we are collaborating together, I need to have it as a base piece of the collaboration. And he said, you're right, I'm not delivering it. And I said, okay, the love has not left. He never stopped calling me sir for the next 15, 16 years until he finally passed away. Never stopped calling me sir. But our quote relationship had ended. And there were times I had sorrow about it and the heartache that it didn't continue and all of this sort of stuff, but it hurt less in so many ways because he was honest and vulnerable about what he couldn't deliver. Right? And that I was honest and vulnerable about what I needed. Because on the times that I wasn't vulnerable in those ways, where I was just like, I can make this work. I can make this work. I can deal with it. I can make it work. Both during and after the relationship ended, it's hurt so much more, even, 5, 6 years after a breakup, still hurts. Compared to somebody that we ended our relationship and until the day they literally the day they died. Because I joke, so slight side note, but I think it's a funny story about authority transfer and authority dynamics. 4 years before he passed, he was in the 6-year process of renal failure. I said to him, please, if I'm visiting Australia at the time, please don't die when I'm in country because I'm just going to stick around to mourn you. I shit you not. He hugged me on a Saturday. I flew home on the Monday. He waited until I was off the ground from Australia and died 2 hours later. He literally followed my last request/order from him in the time that he died.
Oh.
Right? And it's interesting to me that, again, a relationship can end, but relationships can still exist. And it hurts, but it also doesn't hurt. I don't know. That kind of meandered a little bit, but I think that's just kind of where my brain's at tonight.
Well, first, I'll send my condolences once again, but that's profound. Man, there's so much to talk about on all of that. I don't even know where to go.
Well, I mean, the main piece we were going to was when does it hurt more or less? Right? If there's pains and challenges in these relationships, when does it hurt more and when does it hurt less? And how do we know what it is for ourselves?
Well, there's a quote, and I'm going to butcher it because it's coming to me really off the cuff. It's something along the lines of, life is pain, but we get to choose what type. The pain of being haunted with regret or the pain on the road to success.
Whew.
There are no such things as smooth mountains. Right? And struggles and criticisms are prerequisites for greatness, and nobody will escape it. Period.
Period.
And so we get to choose the pain, but life is pain. And one of my backpacking buddies, he was an old Marine, and he had a crude saying, and I'll bring it in, but I love it. Embrace the suck.
Oh, embrace the suck, totally.
And my cliche saying I've probably been saying for 20 years is, if the world didn't suck, we'd all fall off. So thank gravity.
That's hilarious.
Right?
Yeah.
And holding on to that pain, I think that for me, pain inherently is value neutral until I attach a value to it.
Yeah, pain is information.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times for me, I used to perceive that pain as personal, that it was a direct personal offense to Dustin and the core of my identity. And it wasn't that it was time for me to leave this relationship because of me or because of them. It does not matter. It was personal. It was, I wasn't a good enough this, or they weren't a good enough that. They couldn't listen. I couldn't tell, whatever it may be. It was very personal.
Yeah.
I even had something just recently come up. I'm working on an event and I was doing something, and the joke is I'm the AI guy. And I took it personal. And I'm like, but I am the AI guy. That's why I got this gig, is because I'm bringing AI to it. But why did I take it inherently personal that this thing that I brought to him was to AI? Who cares? It's not me. It's not Dustin. It's just something else, right? It's its own identity.
Well, in combination though with when I hear that negative response, the piece that I wonder about, like just the curiosity, is what about you thinks that being the AI guy is bad?
Ooh.
Like, why are you bristling to the notion of being the AI guy?
Ooh. Off the cuff, off the top of my head, probably society.
There you go.
Me not being confident in myself, if I'm just being very vulnerable. I've been at the forefront of technology for a very long time, and I've enjoyed it and all the things. But to some level now, there's a lot of negative pushback against artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But that's not pushback against Dustin. That's not me.
But going back to the internalization construct, the negative and the pain that holds on to as the, oh, you're the AI guy. What you're not hearing from them is you're the AI guy. What you're hearing is everything you've been seeing on the internet about how AI sucks. If we then apply that to authority transfer dynamics, it's the idea of, the statement is simply, oh, your relationship with your slave has ended. That's a fact, right? But what we might be hearing, or what I have certainly heard, is, thus you are a failure because this relationship is ended, comes with all these other stories attached that your friends have been telling around you, or the internet's been saying of, oh, if you can't keep a relationship together, it's clearly because you were a bad master or a bad mistress or an inappropriate owner, or you didn't have the ability to keep it together as somebody's manager or boss or their dragon or whatever term you use, right? Is all of this other shit that has nothing to do with the statement, your relationship is done. That's just it is. That just is. Everything else is either projection, attachment, association, inference, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Absolutely.
From ourselves or from someone else, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Oh, I definitely have carried for many years from this is thinking of a different relationship ending, the idea that I'm just another abandoning dominant. That's not what I was told. I was, or what happened in the relationship. What happened was the relationship ended because I was imperfect and the space that they were in was not a match to where my imperfection was that day. That's not bad or good. That's me being an imperfect human being. And I am so grateful that former partner of mine took care of themselves. I am so grateful. But they never said I was an inherently bad person. But the story in my head, I'm just another top who abandons people. I'm just another bottom who leaves people worse off afterwards. That's, again, attachment, story, whatever, but it's there. And it becomes the question then for you then too, what do we do if that little voice in our head or the voice from society that, oh, you're just the AI guy, what do we do then?
This makes me think of something I just read, and I've read it time and time again, and I was just talking about it. I don't know if you know who Soul Hunter is. He's kind of retired for a while now. But on his profile, it says some people would say I'm bad for women, and they are wrong. And that's always just rung out to me for various reasons. But going back to like what I felt like, I think some of the vulnerability that's going to come out is that some of Dustin has just felt bad. And now as soon as AI's, before I used to be so proud that I'm working with AI and all the stuff I'm doing with AI, but then when it got close to being bad, and Dustin, even at 40 years old, is still working through those demons of not being a bad Dustin. Does Dustin have imperfections, like you said? Absolutely. Does Dustin have bad parts of him? Absolutely. But Dustin is not inherently bad. I'm not a bad any one thing. I've been a bad boyfriend. I've been a bad master. I've been a bad human.
Right. Yeah, I've done all the above. Yeah.
And some of my path for growth is accepting that and not allowing it to define me. That there has been times where I have failed as a master, as a human, as a father, as a leader, as a business professional. And you know what? I'm going to continue to do so. I'll try not to do it the same time twice, or the same way twice, hopefully. So we've really talked a lot about like the lows and some of the, I think mostly the lows of of a lot of authority. And I want to segue into some of the highs, and I want to get us into some of the topic or the words are hard because I just want to go into this conversation. But some of the questions that I brought up, because I do want to cover such a vast topic, and we only have about 57 minutes left. So we see how fast it flies, but you already knew that.
It's real.
So my next actual official question, can you describe the emotional highs that authority dynamics can create?
So I can hear that question two different ways. One is the notion of a drug modality, and one is the notion of an adventure modality. Under a drug modality that we're talking about, can you describe the highs? There are many times where I have forgotten my sense of self. I've had the deliciousness of entering into altered states of consciousness. I have had the chance to be able to thrive in possibilities that are anywhere from psychedelic in nature to being able to have the profound comfort of being on an indica strain of marijuana, right? Any of the above. There's the drug modalities that you can pretty much choose a drug of your choice, insert the concept there, you can find some degree of authority transfer that can happen within that perspective of looking at the world. The other direction, though, the idea of the high, being able to look from the top of that mountain down into the valley below and see the big picture of our lives and our hearts and our connections as being profoundly valuable and beautiful, because we get to see things from a vantage point we wouldn't anywhere or anyway else. So I think of it both of those perspectives, because I think
I love it. Yeah, the first high you explained, that made me think single word, transcendence.
Yeah.
And I love the loss of self. Anybody that would like to further their exploration down this path, my personal number one recommendation for books, just me personally, is Radical Ecstasy by Dosey and Hardy. That book profoundly changed how I interact on a transcendental level with people. And I don't know if that's a great way of phrasing it, but there was always something more inside of my scenes, this loss of self. And I remember a story where I believe it was Dozy explaining where
No, it's Darcy.
Dossie, thank you for correcting. It was the loss of self, and it was simply nothing but a being beaten, and a being that is doing the beating, and nothing else mattered, and all of the world dissolved away. The second high makes me think of something I've heard the goddess Indigo talk about very often, and that's the force multiplier. My girl is a force multiplier of me.
Mhm.
I'm one, she's one. Together, we're somehow 11. I don't know how, but we add so much value to each other's life.
Right.
And I am a better me because of her, and she's a better her because of me and us and all of the things, right? And when I think of the highs of authority, I really think of that simple statement of being a force multiplier, not
Yes.
just her multiplying my force, but me multiplying her force in my flavor of authority.
Yes, absolutely.
I want the people that serve me to be powerful in their own right. I'm going to go ahead and make a bold statement. I am INTJ. I am slightly judgmental. I don't mean to offend anybody, but for me, there is nothing authoritative for me to just take control of a quote unquote weak person. With that said, I do not inherently think any human is weak, right? I want someone powerful. I want someone that can handle their day-to-day life. They don't need me to help them. They don't need me to lead them. They want me to.
So my language for that is for somebody to exchange power with me, they need power to exchange. Is my framework on that. But going back to Raven, my grumpy old man, I love my grumpy old man, but he has a metaphor that I really appreciate, which is that if what you have is a Stradivarius, but you don't know how to play a violin, and what you need in your life is a hammer, you have, when you look at that Stradivarius in front of you, you have a very useless hammer. You can dip them in steel or iron and then make them into a, not technically a hammer, but not the best hammer out there. And they are no longer a Stradivarius. And I thought, when I first heard this notion, I thought it was such an interesting way to look at things. If we're looking at force multipliers, if we're looking at the idea of addition to each other's lives and the highs of it, if I have a Stradivarius in front of me, what would it be like to name that they are not a hammer? And that is not bad. It makes them one of the most beautiful violins in the world. What would it be like for me to learn how to play a violin? What would it be like for me to help them find someone who does play a violin? And between the three of us, we make amazing music. I own the violin, and this person I have found knows how to play a violin. And because of my loaning of the violin out, music exists that would never happen otherwise.
The thoughts that you...
Oh, go ahead, please, love.
Oh, I was going to say, the thoughts you helped spur, it reminded me of a very old quote, and I pulled it up because it's such a profound quote for me that it's in my notes, like as a personal favorite, right? And it says, if your only tool is a hammer, then every problem you encounter will look like a
The
nail.
hammer.
And
Yes.
sometimes this will just screw you,
Okay, that's funny.
right?
That's funny.
I love plays on words,
It's
right?
good stuff, right? Right?
And I think about that, and I've been that person, and I've talked
Yeah.
about it often. While I'm an intellect, sometimes I do become a Neanderthal, usually in sexual moments, but sometimes not. Sometimes I look at that Stradivarius and I just need a hammer. It does not matter that this is a $15,000 or $25,000 violin, and that's probably being conservative. I sort of know a little bit, but not enough to sound
Yeah.
dangerous or dumb. But if I need a hammer, I'm gonna make it work, just like a rock or anything else.
And one of the things I've sat with, though, about creating these highs in our relationship is what would it be like to see these tools before us as the tools that they are? And then honor me in how I know how to use tools. And I feel very blessed in the fact that my brain is wired consensually non-monogamous. Not everyone's is. And I've had windows of my life where I've consciously chosen to be monogamous. And I've had other windows of my life where I've been informed that I am monogamous. These are all different things. But to be able to say to this, being in front of me, oh, you are a violin. Let me help you find someone who can play you, but you can still be mine. But that only works because possession is a fetish for me. And they are still mine. If that isn't a core thing for you, that actually doesn't work that way. So the high for me of lifting up and being like, look, I found a violin player. And look, my violin got played. For me, that's a high. For monogamous folks I know, that would be a low. So part of knowing how I operate in seeing the beautiful humans in front of me is also honoring how my brain works or doesn't work. Because if I wasn't a possession-based person, or I wasn't somebody who didn't feel threatened by having a different relationship structure in my life, then that wouldn't work. But even in things that look parallel, I had a hilarious moment happen recently. And by hilarious, I mean hugely romantic, but also weird and funny. I had another daddy who wanted to play with my boy. And what they did is find out from my boy my favorite type of chocolate and flowers. And they left me a gift saying, thank you for letting me play with your boy. Here is my thank you gift. And I was like, okay, that was hot. Emotionally, romantically, sexually, I think it turned me on a little bit too. I was like, yeah, that, because here's another person who could have been perceived by me on the low side, could have been perceived by me as a threat. Another daddy doing physical activities and emotional activities that look like, in a snapshot camera sort of way, look like what it is that we do. But instead, it pivoted like that because they said thank you. And to me, when I think of the difference between, think about highs, is what were the things that collaborated towards it being a high? And for me, the word thank you and being remembered somewhere in the equation. Didn't matter when, could be before, could be after, could be during. The act of being remembered changes things from personally challenging to emotionally inspiring in my brain. And so my curiosity would be for you, what are things that turn things that could be bumpy into things that are excellent? Do you have any that you're aware of for you?
Oh, I mean, I can think of like personal stuff that are outside of authority. I think the most concise way to say it is I get frustrated when things don't go the way I think they should.
Okay.
And it almost always never is to do with a person. how I phrase it has to do with a process or a product.
Okay.
The thing didn't happen as fast as I thought it would, or the product wasn't delivered, or some, like, nonetheless, for me, that's when I struggle often.
Well, and if those are the things that bring it down, what that same moment that didn't go as fast as I'd hoped, when have those been pivoted into being acceptable truth or even excellent moments? That same moment, it didn't take as long as I thought. What turns it from that sucks into okay, or all right, it didn't happen. Let's go forward.
So an exercise that I was encouraged to start by a professional. I think most people should talk to professionals, to be clear, at least at some point in their life, was to be more mindful of the moment, and that some things are outside of my control and I cannot control everything. So for me, something that's been pretty life-changing is when those moments of the process, the thing doesn't happen fast enough, it's because I needed patience. There was some authority bigger than me that needed to remind Dustin to be patient today. Because I actually talk about how I'm a very patient person normally, because I normally am. And in that moment, when it didn't happen fast enough, I forgot that I'm patient. And I forgot that patient is a virtue that I enjoy having part of me as a core human characteristic. And there was something bigger than me that needed to remind me. And sometimes I took it personal, right?
Yeah.
Going back to that, it was personal. I wasn't fast enough. I wasn't good enough. Insecurity, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of different things for me personally that I've had to suss out when it comes to some of the lows in life.
So oh, go ahead, please, love.
I would say, so my final thought in ending this is that something that's not always easy, but whenever I start to get that frustrated or I feel that low, just recently, a miscommunication. Well, I need to be patient. I need to step back. How could I say it differently? And somebody bigger than me, whether that's Allah, Buddha, God, whoever you believe in, I personally believe that there's something bigger than me. I don't want to put a definition or a term to it necessarily, but it needed to remind me that.
So it sounds like making meaning out of a thing is helpful. And I'm also hearing from you that things that affirm things that you believe in about yourself. This thing not going well is a chance for me to practice a value I have about myself. The value being I am a patient person. Which means if I'm hearing those in the way that if I am hearing the way that you are trying to be heard, it sounds like a way to pivot things that are dark experiences or challenging experiences in DS is to either have them make meaning or have them be things that allow you to reaffirm a thing you believe about yourself.
I love mantras, and I'm just going to go out on a rim. I speculate you may appreciate mantras as well.
Yeah.
One of my mantras in life, and it's one of my newer ones, is there's no such thing as failures. There's only feedback.
Yep. That's a good one.
And this leads us right into a really important question.
Yeah.
How can couples navigate breakdowns inside of authority dynamics effectively?
I've heard two very different perspectives on those moments. Option one, pause the dynamic and address this as egalitarian individuals, people who are of an equal energy to each other, so that you're able to have a sober mind in the dialogue and be able to look at people as humans rather than people who are within specific power places. Perspective one. Perspective two, honor that you are in different places, or as and people have mixed feelings about them, as Namaste Moore, Slave Namaste, formerly known as Slave Namaste, likes to say, as approaching the king, that she is the queen and he is the king. And so therefore, no matter what has happened and how much the king has, and she would never say these words, how much the king has fucked up, she would never say those words. But as much as that has happened, to acknowledge that he is still the king. And you do not shame the king in public. You have conversations with feedback and information and tools for the king behind closed doors. And honoring that even if you have more information than the king does, you still approach him with the value that the king brings as being king.
Mm.
These are two very different approaches, and I have seen both of them work really well and both of them work really poorly. And part of it has required knowing which one helps the brains and hearts and spirits of the individuals in question. Because if for some people, entering into these power imbalances is a thing that is a thing that you are doing, going into a place of egalitarian dynamic is important because you stop doing and you return to being. If, however, being in non-egalitarian dynamics is a thing you are, then doing it is actually really bad for you. Like going into an egalitarian space would be potentially challenging or harmful for the people involved because you're stopping being authentic. And you go to do relationship repair. And I think that, it's interesting, I've never said it that way before. I think it's really key to know which one is your doing and which one is your are.
Mm. So much of this conversation I have appreciated, Lee. Thank you for your thoughts.
Oh my God, this is so juicy.
I appreciated that most of these answers you've given two very different trees and schools of thoughts. No, the reason why I appreciate it, I don't know, I have Asperger's, I don't know if you know that. I'm not always great at hiding emotion or expressing emotion. And when you said to talk at an egalitarian, I almost cringed. I felt me cringe.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, yeah, like your shoulders started to do this thing, like creeping up towards their ears.
I was like,
No. But there's other people I know for whom it's like, no, they need to. And I'm like, cool. It's actually one of the things I ask when I'm doing like mentoring or like peer facilitation and assistance for couples that are doing stuff. And I'm like, I need you to know which one matters more to you. Like, especially for people who have been married and are like egalitarian marriage and are now entering into a DS dynamic. And I'm like, which matters more to you, the power exchange or the marriage?
Love or authority.
But it should be both. And I'm like, yes, I am asking you that if shit hits the fan, right? Metal to the whatever, I don't know, insert your metaphor here. If you had to choose only one, is it the relationship would survive without the DS? I mean, the marriage would survive without the DS, or is it that the DS would have survived without the marriage? Which one is it?
For me, authority trumps everything.
Authority trumps everything. And I know other folks for whom it's like, no, our marriage has to come first. And again, I'm using marriage for whatever individual's dynamics. I'm getting married next month to my boy, and it's on our 2-year collarversary, and it's been hilarious seeing people in the communities of kink, sexuality, and power exchange, even full-time authority transfer people who are like, oh, I'm so happy for you. Good, like good job on leveling up. And I'm like, I had the real one 2 years ago. This is just the one in front of the rabbi and the priestess, like, and the family. Like, I had the real one. I had them down on their knees. I sutured their heart to my heart, lifted them up off the ground. Like, I did the thing. I've got a lock on it full time. Like, this is the thing. I did the thing already. Like, the wedding is nice and I'm looking forward to it. And we got a great new blender, right? It's fantastic. Excuse me, not blender. Like I'm loving it, right? And it's a chance to play dress up. I got new shoes, a custom suit. Like life is good. But I did the big one already.
Yeah.
But it's so
Yeah.
interesting that even for folks who are like, this is my full-time thing, that even though they know they've been mine for 2 years, that they're like, oh, it's so good you're finally getting married. And I'm like, I don't need that part.
Yeah.
I needed the other one. And in navigating things with my boy, though, this is the big one. That one had deep meaning to them. But this one's the big one, which means if we get to navigate things for the two of us, it means I get to have a choice. Either I set down the DS for a period of time and we have that conversation, or they're going to have to do it in my direction, but we're a mismatch in this. But we know we're a mismatch in it. And that's the difference that makes this a high for me in learning that out, is that we've both looked at it and gone, okay, if things come up, what's the plan? And the plan is that they leave their collar on while we have these hard conversations, because taking it off, unless it's during Jewish high holidays, in which case that can't be there. They've got to deal with God. God has a slightly larger share of them than I do. But that collar's not coming off while we're having those hard conversations, so that even if it's not where their headspace is at, they are telling me I'm not no longer your boy. They are making the commitment to me right now. I'm not taking this off unless we've had a long, hard conversation about that fact. I'm not just ripping this off at any point. What I loved is that we had this conversation when we were both emotionally sober, not during a time when we were bad.
Mhm.
We learned that we were coming from different directions on this. And we both had the bravery to say, we're a mismatch on this, and I'm scared to tell you that. We had that moment and said, okay, then what's the plan? Because as he said, we're going to fuck up. Right? We have been a bad insert word here. Each you and I have. Right? You, Dustin, and I have both had those bad blank moments. So what do we do when we're in good blank headspace? How do we set up those fuck ups to harm less? They might still hurt. But how do we have them harm less and bring us back to joy and excellence more often? Because to me, that's part of how we create the highs. Hell, if we go back to the drug definition, it's why you test your drugs to make sure what's in them is actually in them. You're setting yourself up for a better trip.
So this makes me think of a conversation that I had with Sir Dragon Z about 6 months or so ago. And my words on his thoughts, and they're close to his thoughts, was that if we go out and get drunk tonight, who are we to think we're not going to be hungover tomorrow? And that applies to a lot of, let me backtrack, that can apply to a lot of our play, right? Where we do, in my opinion, not a medical professional. Part of my day job is I did work research and development, focusing on firearm and first aid simulation training. So I have a fundamental understanding on medical. By my definition, and I would argue by medical definition, some of what we do is intoxication. There is not the research that proves definitively it is intoxication, but it is intoxicating. And whether it's intoxicating from outside substances or inside substances, the body has to recover.
Yes.
It's like the polarities of everything. If we're going to have a high, we have to have a low. If you're going to be happy, you have to have sadness.
Though I would add a comment to that, because what you're talking about is this notion called aftercare, right? We're going to have a crash. You have to take care of yourself afterwards. But as somebody who has danced with psychedelics for many years, right, starting around the same time period that I was dancing with power exchange dynamics, one of the things that makes a good trip is prepping ahead of time. And if we're talking about drinking and being, quote, hung over, you're less likely to be hung over if you drank water the same night.
Yep. Eat a
Right.
banana the next morning.
You eat a banana the next morning. Hell, you eat a banana the day before. You do. You drink some anti-dehydration powders of some sort or another before you go drinking. But the kink community obsesses about aftercare, but doesn't look at pre-care or during care. And I think one of the things that makes for better highs that don't have crashes in relationships is that we also do the pre-care, called therapy or called, having friends or having peer discussion groups or having read books or listening to podcasts like yours. Pre-care. During care is, what are we doing when we're excellent, when we're emotionally sober, to keep the nuts and bolts in place so that our ship can sail. I'm back on that metaphor, apparently, right? Like, we've got all this stuff in place so that we're not relying only on the aftercare for when stuff has gone wonky or gone super high. What would it be like if we built in and supported each other with more pre-care and during care concerning the power exchange and authority transferred communities?
Love it. I love it. It's another one of my quotes is, well, it's not even mine. It's misquoted to Abraham Lincoln. I don't know who actually said it, but if you give me 6 hours to sharpen an axe or to cut down a tree, I'm gonna spend the first 5 hours sharpening my axe. Right. And I think about building that foundation. And earlier I said time, and I don't know why, because I know, and I have a provable track record professionally and personally from my biased perspective that says time does not make good decisions. Information does. Time facilitates the ability to get information sometimes.
Only if you actually do it, though.
Well played, sir. Well played. Absolutely. And this is where, like, some people, I called it out earlier in one of my episodes where the first time I seen a master and slave, I felt them and I was envious.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was exactly, but I wanted that right there. That's what I want. And I don't know how I'm going to get it, but I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
So we're running out of time. There's never enough time, right? So I want to try to cover some.
As a note, though, this is just a piece I'm going to point out as a speaker to another speaker. No one knew the plot line but you.
Oh, I know.
If we only cover these 3 things and had a delicious time and people listening learn something, we win.
Yeah. No, and that's something that goes back to where I need to remember, right, to step back and be patient. Right. Because this has been a phenomenal conversation for me.
It has been.
And I'm not trying to be selfish here, but I have so many notes. I've taken so many reels. I got lots of thoughts just spinning in my head right now. And I appreciate you helping encourage these thoughts. And wow. Nonetheless,
so let's take one more off your list. Let's grab one and see where we go.
All right. Well, I'd like to try to get 2 because I think there's 2
Let's see what happens.
Really important ones. We'll see if we can get them. How can partners rebuild trust after authority dynamics break down? I know, a doozy for trying to do 2, right? Mm.
So a lot of people picture a damage of trust as knocking down a wall, but I'm a believer that broken trust is actually digging a hole under the wall until it collapses. And you've got to actually repair the foundational work before the wall can be rebuilt again.
Mm.
Because if you're just trying to build the wall again on top of that same hole that never got repaired, then it's not going to hold up. It's got that same fault that was added. So I think the pieces to that then are to honor why the hole got dug in the first place. Because I know for me, when I've accidentally been the one, or in some cases purposely been the one that knocked down that wall, it was because there was something else going on. And so what's the actual issue? Because it wasn't the affair, it was something else. It's not the breaking of a promise, it's something else. What led to the damage in the first place? In combination then with both parties being able to actually hear and do that mutual repair work, because I bet you that affair didn't happen just because you were bored. That affair also happened because your partner hadn't been listening to you for a while. That's not to say it's your partner's fault that you then had the affair. It means that you had the affair and there's other stuff that needs to be looked at too. So yes, apologize for the affair. Yes, don't do it again. And what needs to be addressed in the relationship so it doesn't happen again? Because that trust doesn't need to just be built from the person who violated the trust. The trust has to be built on the other side so that I don't believe you're going to leave me because I once cheated on you 7 years ago. I have to believe that you're sticking around too. And that is built, in my belief, on having that vulnerability to bring it to each other, what needs to change so it doesn't happen again.
Mm.
So there's my nice, light, happy answer. Is as sometimes also referred to as you got to do the work.
Yeah. Well, and that I think I love all your.
A quick side point to that, because I just brought the dreaded words. You got to do the work. Part of doing the work also includes having the feel to do it, which means you also got to do the play. You repair it by also doing the play. Because if all it is work day in, day out, you don't have the fuel to work. So if that's a hot scene, whether that is, falling in love, going on vacation, reading a nerdy book together and arguing theory and semantics for 16 hours, I don't know what brings you joy. But yeah, I just want to make sure I said not just do the work, but do the work and do the play.
Don't quote me. I believe it's Ray Dalio speaks on the 80-20 principle, where if you'll never operate at 100% if you're always operating, a battery needs to recharge.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to give yourself that 20% to recharge.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what deadlines you have or what things you're trying to accomplish or this, that. If you're running at 100% all the time, you never are actually running at 100%.
Right.
You're at a deficit at that point, right? Yeah. Low battery.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't sharpened your axe. To go back to your Lincoln quote or semi-Lincoln quote.
So a thought that as you were conveying your thought, I was still sitting on some of your previous thoughts, right?
I'm laughing in empathy. Yes.
And for me, I guess I didn't realize it, but I have done some of this pre-work unconsciously. And I think
Mm,
that when it comes to rebuilding trust, I need to do more because I'm going to break people's trust. I'm not infallible. I try not to be a liar. I'm many things, but I try not to be a liar, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to break your trust. Trust is not inherently only broken by deception, in my opinion, right? But to do that pre work and something that's been very, very monumental and or at least from my perspective, in the last year of considering my girl, was to be very adamant that I'm not on a pedestal. That yes, I can be your authority figure. Yes, I can be your leader, but I still will make mistakes. I cannot be put on that pedestal, otherwise I will fall off. And it'll be very hard for me to climb back up. But if you understand that I am a human, I'm going to cry. Believe it or not, as a strong, masculine, dominant male, I cry. I have moments
mhm.
of weakness, and
Yeah,
and in my opinion, that makes me more powerful.
I agree. I strongly agree.
But there was a part of Dustin as a traditional male, I didn't think I could cry.
Yeah.
And at one point in life, I said, how can I ask for all this vulnerability from the people that serve me and around me, but I'm not willing to offer it back to them? You're a hypocrite. And I'm not, I'm once again, I'm many things, but I try not to be a hypocrite. And if I want vulnerability, then I have to be able to express vulnerability and provide a space that's safe for vulnerability.
Expressing vulnerability, though, this is me as the transgender educator about to step in, though. Expressing vulnerability is not the same as crying. When I started
Mm,
taking testosterone, I literally stopped being able to cry as easily. Like medically,
interesting.
and the number of transgender men, I can't think of a single trans man I've talked to who has not had some degree of that, who have had to relearn how to cry or have had to find other ways to either have tears induced or like listening to some sad music before they can then share their feelings, or who have to find vulnerability sharing in other ways. So I'm not letting men off the hook, as it were, but I'm letting you know, as somebody who has danced in multiple gender and hormonal experiences, that volumes of testosterone in the body can shift the capacity to as easily let go of tears.
Mm,
So, just side fact
thank
what I thought I
you.
would share
No,
to not let men off the hook, but to let men know that it's not abnormal for folks who have higher amounts of testosterone to need to trigger emotional release in other ways. That's not unusual.
there is a non-zero sum moments of my life that all make sense now. Like genuinely, seriously. Like there's so many moments where I didn't feel like crying, but society s- s- said I should, maybe like a
Right.
funeral type of
Right.
a thing.
Yeah, and though part two on that is not only is the hormonal issue, the simultaneous issue happening is also cultural programming from youth, where the number of men I know who have been told, man up, don't be a
Hmm.
sissy,
Yep.
come on, dust yourself up and just get back to work.
Yep.
And this isn't
Real
just
men
child,
don't cry.
real men don't cry, all of that bullshit, right? And
Yep.
when you add those two together, oh, here's one number three, right? So we've got testosterone, we've got cultural frameworks of manhood, and then we add real doms don't.
Mm.
Part three to a perfect storm of especially cisgender men, not, or actually a cisgender male dominance, but male dominance in general, not being given space to be able to express their emotions from an authentic place.
Mm.
Because, well, clearly what you do is you need to be able to show that DOMs cry too. Well, is that what we need to do? Or is success DOMs learning how to express emotion authentically and being vulnerable with those emotions? That is not inherently the same thing as crying.
Facts.
It's not inherently the same thing as crying. But no, people not crying at funerals is like that is a thing that happens. That's a
Yeah,
thing.
and it's not that I
I just
don't.
lost a lot of my sense of smell randomly. I'm convinced it's the only way men can tolerate men's restrooms. Is that testosterone took away some of my sense of smell.
I thought it was my deviated septum, but maybe it's the testosterone.
Right, all of the above. Why choose one when we can have all of our issues affect us? But I think there's something really powerful there that I'm hearing you say, which is, don't put me on a pedestal. It's going to be too high up for me to crawl back onto or get back up onto. My question for you then becomes, how do you have people understand the difference between hearing that and feeling it?
Oof.
How do you set you and a partner up for success to actually do what you're talking about? Because I've said it before and had people not hear me. Right? I've said I'm imperfect and had them be like, "Oh, I understand." And then when I'm unperfect, they go, "But," and I'm like, "But I came with the warning label."
I'm a work in progress.
Okay.
So it's still something that I'm learning more and more. This dynamic that I'm in currently, we're about at the year point. It's
Mhm.
been the one that I've been most intentional on. I'm a human, that slowing down a little bit on things and making sure that we communicate effectively, and that's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, learning that trust isn't just me breaking someone's trust or causing harm isn't just inherently what it could be perceived, right? Of like lying or hurting someone in suspension. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I've probably hurt my girl's feelings a non-zero sum amount of times, and I probably will again.
Mhm.
And we don't have the recipe for success, because this is something that I've tried to implement into my dynamics for a very long time. You hear me. I'm Dustin, also rope aficionado.
Yes.
There's a writing somewhere, who knows where at this point, where I wake up a human, I go to sleep a human, and what I'm in between that is what is influenced by my emotional, my mental, my physical, my spiritual state, and the people and the places I'm at around.
Right.
So I think that doing a lot of that pre-work,
Yeah.
and just being authentic with her has there's times I get frustrated. Like I said, it's process of the person. She can speak on it herself in her own words, and she's seen me time at the computer. Now she probably senses it. I'm gonna check on him, and then I'm gonna walk away. I'm not even gonna ask him if he needs anything, because she's been reprimanded for that, and reprimanded is a strong word.
Mhm.
But when I'm deep in thought on something that is very high cognitive load, you cannot say a word to me. I need my brain, every cell I have. And I appreciate her coming to check on me, right? And this is where we've had to, because I can admit that I've gotten short with her a few times in those moments.
Yeah.
And I had to call her back into the room, or afterwards I had to come and talk to her and say, "Hey, I just want you to know my tone with you was not acceptable. In the moment, I did not hear my tone.
Yeah.
My brain was focused on my task at hand, and you interrupted it. And the best way to compare it is throwing a wrench in a Ferrari's engine. Does that mean that Ferrari engine should break? No. But at the end of the day, that's the best analogy I can do. And here's what I'm going to do to make sure that I do my part so this doesn't continue to happen." Because she, from my perspective, and once again, she can say her own words, she felt bad. Maybe she took it personal. Maybe she thought she did something wrong. She did absolutely nothing wrong.
Though, a question about the metaphor. If you were to throw a physical wrench into a Ferrari engine, you are irreparably harming that engine.
Mm.
right? As compared to what I'm hearing you describe, which is you stopped the engine for a moment.
Mm,
And so my
fair.
curiosity, is it actually a fair representation? Because, and this is me speaking from servicely brain, because I, again, my orientation over the years has been all over the place. I joke that my orientation with authority transfer is yes. Do you do it? Yes. The rest we'll figure out.
I
Is it
love it.
my brain? As soon as I had somebody go, goes into, I have irreparably harmed this relationship, asking if somebody wanted a bagel. Right. And that's a far dive. And I have since dealt with some of my mental health adventures, and I am medicated and I am happy for it. And when I hear a metaphor that infers irreparable harm, I know for
Oh,
me at least, if I had been that person on the right side of the slash, I know I would double down on that feeling. Again, don't know if that's your girl's reality or not, but I think
no,
it's
but that's interesting because
a
I completely understand and I respect your thoughts and perspective because I didn't think about that. My perspective was the engine stopped momentarily. Now I have to spend a non-zero amount of time to fix the engine and it works again. I'm an engineer. Everything is fixable,
oh,
right?
understood. Everything is fixable. Well, if somebody isn't an engineer, the car broke. It's dead.
And I guess I
This is
didn't really think
prospect
about
testing
how much,
skills.
well, there's a lot of gravity now that you help me think of it from a different perspective. Because most people are like, oh my God, it's a Ferrari. I'm never even going to touch a Ferrari. Oh my God, I just threw a wrench in it. Oh my God. Like, I can't
Right.
afford to fix the Ferrari, let alone do I know how. For me, that's all it was. 15 minutes later, I fixed the Ferrari. I'm back on the road. Just leave me alone.
Well, and if we then pivot that into discussing relationship structures, there's people who have never bruised a relationship and come back from it.
Oh.
Right? And so, therefore, a thing that even looks like you might have bruised it, even if it actually had nothing happen to it, looks like or sounds like or whatever, the end. Because anytime even something close to this has come, it meant the end. I once had a
Mm.
partner say to me, I've never had a partner actually show they liked me until you. And so, therefore, they didn't mean to put me on a pedestal, right? That was what they said to me. And then this is me now extrapolating. They didn't mean to put me on a pedestal. But if none of your former partners have ever liked you before, and this is a first time experiencing that, it's hard not to put someone on a pedestal. And so
Mm.
when I did fuck up, I fucked up further than intended because even though I told them, I still was put on a pedestal because they'd never had somebody like me before.
Mm.
And so just like you have the ability to understand the Ferrari can be brought back, whatever, it's a Ferrari. I wonder sometimes about people who don't have experience in a healthy DS dynamic or a healthy relationship of any sort. I wonder sometimes whether our histories and our skill sets apply to the capacity to understand the any of these structures beyond an intellectual framework until you've done them.
It's interesting you say it. It's almost like you're a mind reader. There was not that long ago where me and my girl had a conversation, something happened. We communicated about it. She thought it was a bigger deal than what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way she framed it, she wasn't used to someone just talking about it and working through it. And she thought this was the end. There's no coming back. The wall is falling over. We've dug a hole to China, type of a thing. And from my perspective, most things are fixable as long as you have the time, energy, resources, right? And in a relationship, you got to have effort on both sides, to be clear. I can want to fix a relationship, but if the other person doesn't, it doesn't matter how hard I try.
Yeah.
And I guess that Um, I probably need to offer her a little more grace when I think about, for me, like I said, a lot of things is fixable. A lot of things is, all right, let's talk about it. Let's business Dustin, let's create some best practices.
Yeah,
Authority Dustin, let's create some protocols,
right.
right? And let's move forward. But not everybody thinks like that. And I know people don't think like me, but I guess that I imagine I will not use that Ferrari analogy anymore.
Or let her know I'm an engineer
Yeah.
and totally know how to fix a Ferrari. So if I use this metaphor, it's because I consider it fixable.
Oh, she knows that about me. I
Now
mean,
she knows that about you. It's because now she has your codex,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But even the sentence of my mother gifted me this language, anytime we use the word just, we are making an assumption about the other person's skill sets.
Ooh.
Which means when we say things like, well, just bring it up to me. Just say something if something's an issue. Just turn off your computer and turn it back on. If I don't know where the switch is, just open it. And this came from the fact that she had a computer programmer saying to her, like, okay, so just go and open up the app. And she's like, what's the little emoji? Like, what's the little icon? What is the program called? And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, you just go down. She's like, I don't know where that is. Which drop-down menu is it? But this guy, for him, that was a 101 level skill set. For her, it was 301. She'd literally never done it before. And I'm grateful for a former partner of mine who came to one of my 101 level rope bondage classes and said to me, I need to point something out to you. And I'm like, what's that? Like, I'm all excited and upbeat about how the class just went. And they said, I don't know if you know, but you brought up the notion of mention to your partners why you want to do bondage, and like that you would like to do bondage. And I'm like, yeah. And she said, saying to a lover at all that you want to do anything, especially for people who are socialized female, bringing up anything or talking about sex or kink or relationships at all is not a 101 skill set. You've got to talk about how to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I had this like epiphany like go off in my head where I was like, oh, I'm justing this person when it comes to communication. And I think it's something that all of us listening get to consider is where are the things that we're assuming about our people? Assuming that they're just like us and they have the skill sets just like us. It's something that I have to figure out all the time. I figure out no one. So thank you, Bonnie Jareggi, wherever you are in your next incarnation. Thank you, Mom. I love you.
It makes me think of this modern wisdom quote that I constantly throw out there. Unspoken expectations lead to hidden resentments.
Yep, exactly. Right. The flip side of that conversation. So thank you, Bonnie Jareggi. And thank you so much for today's conversation. We had set the agreement that we would do 2 hours, so I'm keeping us aware of that.
Yeah, no, yeah. I want to get one more question in, but all that means is I need to be patient and I need to talk to you about coming back at another time.
That's exactly it. Yeah, we get to nerd out about it next time. I love this plan.
Oh yeah. No, this was such a phenomenal
I have so
conversation.
much to chew on. Like you've given me so much juiciness to chew on. I am incredibly grateful.
I am as well. And I want to say how much I appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience, your thoughts, your opinions of, provoking thought. I love it. I cannot say how much I've gained from this episode. So just for me and my selfishness, I appreciate you, Lee. So thank you.
Oh, such goodness. Thank you so much, Dustin. I appreciate being on the show.
So we're going to wrap this up. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Dominance Dialogues. And if you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe and share. As always, stay curious, stay intentional, and keep the dialogue going.